Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Naranam Namaskritya Naram Cheva Narottamam Devim Saraswati Vyatsattato Jaya Mudhirayat Nastrapayesva Bhadresu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Sloke Bhakti Bhavaiti Naistiki Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 12, Text 50. Rishinam Buri Viryanam Apisagam Avistritam Gyatvatadridahe Bhuyas Chintayam Asakurava Rishayanam Buri Viryanam Apisagam Avistritam Gyatvatadridahe Bhuyas Chintaya Asakurava Rishinam Buribhiryanam Abhisargam Avisritam Yatvatadridhaye Bhuyas Chintaya Asakurava. So word for word translation. Rishinam, all the great sages. Buribhiryam, with great potency. Happy in spite of. Sarga, the creation. Avistritam, not extended. Gyatva, knowing. Tat, that. Ridaye, anyhow. Bhuyaha, again. Chintaya, atsa. He began to consider. Korawa, O son of the Kurus. Translation by His Divine Grace is confounded Acharya. Srila Abhachan of Inda Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada Maharaj Kijai. Srila Prabhupada Kijai. Srila Prabhupada Kijai. O son of the Kurus, when Brahma saw that in spite of the presence of sages of great potency, there was no sufficient increase in population, he seriously began to consider how the population could be increased. So there's no purport to this text. We go to the next text. Text 51. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 12, Text 51. Aho abhutam etanme vyapritasya pinityada naedante prajanunam devam atra vigatakam. What translation? Aho, alas, adbhutam, it is wonderful. Etat, this, me, for me. Vyapritasya, being busy. Api, although. Nityada, always. Na, does not. He, sovereignly. Edante, generate. Prajaha, living entities. Nunam, however. Devam, destiny. Atra, hearing. Vigatakam, against. Translation. Brahma thought to himself, alas, it is wonderful that in spite of my being scattered all over, there is still insufficient population throughout the universe. There is no other cause for this misfortune, bad destiny. There's no purport to this text, so we go to the next text. Text 52. Evam yukta kritastasya devam cha vikshatastada kasya rupa abudveda yakayam abhichaksati. Word for word translation, evam, thus, yukta, contemplating, kritaha, while doing so, tasya, his, deva, supernatural power, cha, also, awik shataha, observing, Tada, at that time, Kasha of Brahma, Rupam, form, Abhut, became manifested. Dveha, twofold, Yat, which is Kayam, his body. Abhishek Shate, it is said to be. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace is confined to Church, Srila Bhakti Vasudeva Swami Prabhupada. While he was thus absorbed in contemplation and was observing the supernatural power, two other forms were generated from his body. They are still celebrated as the body of Brahma. Purport. Two bodies came out from the body of Brahma. One had a mustache, and the other had swollen breasts. No one can explain the source of their manifestation. And therefore, until today, they are known as the Kayam, or the body of Brahma, with no indication of their relationship as his son or daughter. Next text. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 12, Text 53. Tabhyam rupam vibhagabhyam mitunam samapadhyata. Synonyms, word for word translation. Tabhyam, of them, rupa, form, vibhagabhyam, thus being divided. Mithuna, sex relation. Sampadhyata, perfectly executed. Translation. The two newly separated bodies united together in a sexual relationship. Next text. Text 54. Yastu tatra pumanso bhum manu swayam bhuva swarat sriyakshik chatarupakya mahishyashi mahishyasya mahatmanaha. Word for word translation. Yaha, one who, two, bed, tatra, there, human, the male, saha, he, abut, became, Manu, the father of mankind, Swayambhuvaha, of the name Swayambhuva, Swarat, fully independent, Stri, the woman, Ya, one who, as it there was, Satarupa, of the name Satarupa, Akya, known as Mahist, the queen, Asya, of him, Mahatmanaha, the great. Translation, one of them, the one who had a male form, became known as the Manu, named Swayambhuva, and the woman became known as Satarupa, the queen of the great soul Manu. Next text. Text 55 of chapter 12, Canto 3, Srimad Bhagavatam. Tadami tu nadamena prajahyadan babuvire. Word for word translation. Tada, at that time, mituna, sex life. Dharmina, according to regulative principles. Prajaha, generations. He, certainly. Edam, increased. Babuvire, took place. Translation. Thereafter, by sex indulgence, they gradually increased generations of populations, one after another. All right. Om Agyana Timirandasya, Gyanajana Salakaya, Saksol Meditam Jayana Tasmine, Sigurave Namaha. Suchetam Manobistam, Stafitam Yenabuta Le, Swam Rupam Kadamayam, Dadati Swa Padantikam, Vandeham Si Gurum Si Utapadakam, Si Gurum Vaishnavancha. Sirupam Sagrajatam Saha Gana Ragnatam Vitam Tam Tajiv Sadhveta Sarvadut Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanyate Sirada Krishna Pada Saha Gana Lalita Vishakam Vitam Cha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Ko Pesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namusti Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavaneshware Vrishabhanu Sate Devi Pranamami Hari Priya Vande Sri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Sahodato Godadhaya Puspavanto Chito Chandutamon Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Si Advaita Gadadara Sivasadi Gora Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namani Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Pasatya Disatari Vancha Kalpataribhya Cha Kripasunambhya Eva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo. So welcome everyone to this morning Bhagavatam class. So this series of these texts, they are bringing light or giving some insight about the hurdles of Lord Brahma in the process of his creation. Now, creation has different phases. In fact, if you read the Bhagavatam, it gives you some fundamental idea on how creation is based on the Vedic system actually exists. It's completely different from the contemporary scientific theory that may not actually be repeated. When we say, sometimes in science, that if a theory is accepted, then that very theory could be repeated. That experiment could be repeated by another scientist to demonstrate the validity or the veracity of that very theory. But if it cannot, if it cannot be experimented by another scientist to get the same results, you can't really generalize it. But unfortunately, the theory of creation that is in vogue is very much counterproductive to actual knowledge acquisition and evolution of human values and ethics. And so here we find the reverse in the Srimad Bhagavatam, which gives us insight about how the Lord expands and then into different manifestations, different forms. And ultimately, this Lord Brahma also was created from the Lord's own navel, lotus flowers that stems out from the Lord's navel. So it's a whole complex situation about the primary stages in creation. And even this secondary stage where Lord Brahma is taking up responsibility to generate entities, it's a little bit still complex for Lord Brahma, because here we find that he was feeling a little bit confused because he wanted something to be done in a particular way. He wanted to see some outcome of his efforts, but that was not forthcoming. He wanted the world to be populated, but that was not forthcoming. So he has to take up some responsibility. So in the early text, he mentioned that besides the fact that there are all these sages with high profile potencies, he doesn't see the world populated. You don't see the world populated. And so Lord Brahma, by his contemplation, you see, there are different types of mystic cities. And if we read the 11th count of the Srimad Bhagavatam, Krishna explains to Uddhava about the different mystic cities. There are like 18 of them, 8 are major. One of those mystic cities whatever you desire, you can just get it. You don't need to do anything. You just by desiring, you get it. And so Lord Brahma was desiring the world to be populated. And so as he was involved in, he was in this a modus operandi, a modus vivendi, this type of mindset, and wanting to have that plan executed. Lord Krishna fulfilled his desire. He some form manifested from his body. See, those who are very advanced in Krishna consciousness, in their service to Lord Krishna, what they desire comes true. Lord Brahma was wanting something to be done to populate the world, so a male and a female manifested from his body. And Lord Brahma himself was a little bit confused. But from what we understand in the series of this text, is all about procreation. The Lord Brahma wanted the world to be populated. And this is a fundamental principle that we can't run away from. We can't deny the fact that the world needs to be populated. But what is it all about? So again, Lord Krishna gives us a fundamental idea. He said he is sex life that is not devoid of religious principles. And even in the series of this text, specifically in one of them, it's about, a procreation based on regulative principles of freedom from having to take birth again in this material world. And therefore, in the Bhagavatam, it is mentioned that one should not be a parent, a teacher, a guru, except they are in a position to extricate their dependent from the shackles of repeated birth and death, from samsara. So in this text also we understand a proper mentioning that brief purport that idea is to have population based on regulative principles of freedom. The sex life has to be regulated. And then we can invoke very powerful offspring, powerful children. And so Swayambhuva, Manu, and Satarupa. Again, this is something very complex. So Swayambhuva and Satarupa, they're supposedly they're coming from Lord Brahma now. So they are Lord Brahman children. So they are Lord Brahman children, but then they unite to be able to procreate, to populate the world. So one could query that how could this be? They are brothers and sisters. So how could they marry? Where would that be? I mean, how could that be? But the understanding is that it was circumstantial. They were supposed to be the Prajapatis. They're supposed to be the ones who have to do this service. They have to populate the world. I mean, it's like, I remember someone had asked Prabhupada, so if some devotee goes to a place where it is water, there is drought, and you don't find vegetables, what to do? And Prabhupada said, for the purpose of preaching, you can do something, at least you eat something to be able to survive to preach. But it's not that a devotee has to eat anything that he desires just for the purpose of preaching, when there are vegetables and everything else that Krishna prescribed in the Bhagavad Gita. Patram puspam phalam tuyam yome bhakta panashati. We can't jump the gun. We can't use the scripture to rationalize our deviations. So here, the understanding is that this was a special service, and the world has to be populated, and there was no one else who has to do it. Lord Brahma had generated two children, man and a woman. Who else is going to populate the world? Of course, the two of them. So that relationship was circumstantial. Now, if a boy and a girl have a relationship because of whatever circumstance they deem appropriate, it is not acceptable. in the Constitution, in the American Constitution. And most countries, it's not acceptable. So we can make a reference to the Bhagavatam that, but you know, Satarupa and Swayambhuva, they're children of Lord Brahma. No, that's not appropriate. This was due to a specific service. There was no one else on the planet. They had a particular assignment, and so the circumstances prevailed. And therefore, the understanding is that we have to see how best we are also populating the world, because this is the desire of Lord Brahma. He wants the world to be populated. And that is why in our system, the Grihastha community is the most important aspect, because this community is responsible for sustaining the growth of the movement. They have to, you know, bring forth powerful children who could sustain the propagation of Krishna consciousness. They have to generate funds to be able to build temples. They have to generate funds to be able to facilitate the printing of Papa's books, to spread this knowledge to all nooks and crannies of the world. This is the instruction of Prabhupada. This is also the desire of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that his name should be spread in all nooks and crannies of the world. And so it is important for us to learn something from this very the series of this text. Essentially, that like here in Naperville, this is a Grihastha community. So you have a responsibility to be able to see that, you know, you have your temple running nicely, but you also become, you are participative in all of the functional connotations of the spiritual elevation of the society or of the community. So some of you will be are helping with, you know, deity service and different type of services, management and all this stuff. Yeah, this is what is required of the devotional community. We have to be involved in participative Krishna consciousness evolution. And so the texts are they're very straightforward. There is no ambiguity. It's about historiography of creation. And so if you understand this text deeply, the next question should be, oh, but who is going to accept this type of, you know, creationism right out there? So that is where we have the challenge. We have to prepare our next generation to be able to transfer this knowledge to the high-profile people in society. But how to do that? We have to plant our children, our next generation, in high-profile positions, so that by their values, by their knowledge, spiritual knowledge, information, culture, they can impact positively on their fellow colleagues. I remember, you know, I was in South Africa some years ago. I stayed in a couple's home, and the husband is a management scientist. The wife is an IT research fellow. And so the wife told me a story how in a research firm, she is the only one who is a Vaishnavi, or who is a practitioner of devotional culture. And so all of the other researchers, they know her as someone who is completely, you know, who has exceptional values, high spiritual values. And then, because she identifies herself as a devotee, and they see her chanting and all this stuff, her lifestyle is completely different. But she has the degrees that everyone else has. But she has values that no one else has in the organization. So she was like a deity. They respected her so much so that if there is a need for some particular policies, they will consult her and, you know, figure out what is best to be done. And so she mentioned how one day, one of the research fellows, she's a lady, this lady I'm talking about is Indian body, because in South Africa we have Indian bodies, whites and blacks. So she's an Indian body. But then one of our fellow colleagues, she came to her one day, a lady she came to her one day, and that lady is married to a Christian a Christian pastor who owns his own church, a very big preaching mission this guy has. And so the wife of this guy, who is a fellow colleague, came to her and said, please, you teach me yoga, because I see the values you have. No one else has those values in our organization. I'm attracted to you based on those values. Teach me. I want to be like you. That's how she groomed this lady in devotional service, taught her how to chant and everything else, the philosophy. They started chanting together during the breaks. She didn't need to preach to her. She just came, this lady, the colleague just came to her out of her own volition. And so, yes, we have all this wonderful, high-profile knowledge. We should think also how this knowledge could reach out to other people out there so that policies, government policies could have some influence based on this knowledge. Again, I was in Croatia some time ago, and there was this one of the congressmen at that time was someone who was trying to be a devotee. And so they were having some a bill on in the assembly on abortion. And so this guy, at that time I was very active on Facebook, so we are connected also on Facebook. So he approached me on Facebook and said, Maharaj, see, what can I do to help in this case? These people, they're just completely crazy, you know, all these abortion things. I said, go to 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, this chapter, you know, there is a whole graphic explication on how these type of policies could be avoided, because it gives you details on the movement of the living entity, how the living entity, right from day one, the living entity is a spiritual personality. It's just that it takes shelter. He takes shelter of the womb of the mother, but life is there. So he took advantage. He read the whole of that chapter, and then he was able to make some powerful argument during the debate of that very bill, on that very bill, and that helped to change the policy formulation of that very bill. So this is one of the ways we can think of. Again, I was speaking to one lady had contacted me in London, and she was actually with the local council. She was serving as a counselor in the government. But then something happened in her marriage, and then you know, she get really completely frustrated. The husband ran away with another woman, and so she completely freaked out. And so she was sharing with me how her Guru Maharaj, Bhakti Swami Maharaj, had encouraged her to get into that job. And now she could really go high by going to Congress. And so when I told her about this, Christian guy, well, she was really motivated. Oh, she said, oh, she just had to execute her guru's order to get into to try to vie for a position in the Congress. So if we want our movement to spread, yes, we come together, just a few of us here, we come together and absorb this knowledge, good for our own purification. But we should think globally too, because the world needs a positive change in policy formulations, in the way that the high-profile government officials think is completely, in most cases, adverse to the positive evolutionary trend of society. And so we owe a lot of Prabhupada to facilitate the spreading of this knowledge to high-profile people with whatever resources we have available, and especially preparing our children for the future, invoking powerful children into our communities by following the Bhagavatam Samskara. So thank you very much. Let me stop here. Maybe there are some comments or some questions. Any comments or questions?
Thank you very much, Maharaj. I think I could resonate with the message where you talked about how we need to raise qualified people in every sphere so that, we can, the this beautiful philosophy can spread to different spheres of our life. And that example that you provided about the lady was, it brought forth that point very much that, and I was thinking that this is effective only if we develop good quality, like, Krishna conscious qualities. So
Sure.
thank you very much.
Thank you, Mataji. Thank you. All right. In the absence of any comments or questions, we may have to adjourn this meeting. All of you are professionals so that you can go about preparing for your work day.
Maybe a minute or so, Maharaj. Maybe devotees will be unmuting. I think, yeah, I see.
I beg your pardon?
Mohanlal Prabhu, you want to ask something?
Yes, Maharaj. Hare Krishna. Dandavatam. Maharaj, while we aspire for a lot of these exceptional qualities in our day-to-day lives, between devotees, we have our own differences, and the not so good qualities manifest also within our association.
Okay.
So, for somebody naive like me, can have a hard time trespassing those difficulties, right?
Okay.
So we can judge and whatnot. So while we aspire for those exceptional qualities that Bhagavatam talks about, how can we overlook the shortcomings also? How do we, tell ourselves and overlook those shortcomings?
Okay. That's a nice point, Mohan. Because you see, we are created as critical beings. we tend to be critical. But according to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he said we should be critical about ourselves. For others, we should just find the good quality in others. For ourselves, we should forget our good qualities. We should find the lapses in our lives, how to be able to improve and excel more and more. But for others, we should find the good qualities in them and find those little sparks of good modus operandi and modus vivendi in others. And then that will facilitate their growth. Because this also follows with the idea that if we, for instance, say you have your child, if you tell your child about, if you appreciate openly to your child about what they have done nicely, they will be highly motivated than only pointing out their faults to them. And so, yeah, this is a situation. It's a psychological construct that we need to imbibe. We should see how we are finding the good in others, and that will help us to appreciate the people around us. Even that should begin with our families, because the family is a microcosm of our community. The family is a fragment, it's a small sample, it's a sample of our community. And so we should see those values in people that we can appreciate and let them understand we appreciate them. We appreciate those values. That alone will give them a sense of motivation and a sense of belonging. And that will help to consolidate relationships. Because if everybody thinks about analyzing, self-analysis, self-diagnosis, and figure out the things they need to improve upon themselves, and we work towards those improvements, we can be better off. But if we simply ignore our own self-diagnosis and self-analysis and develop strategies to be able to improve, if we ignore that and where we focus on others, then that will create a lot of friction. And the point here is that we have 4 regulatory principles, and one of them is no meat eating. Why no meat eating? Means no violence. We don't want to commit. We don't want to harm animals. According to the American Psychological Science Association, violence occurs when we hurt somebody or a group. So even your own child, if you hurt them unnecessarily, you have committed violence. Yes, you have an obligation to be able to direct and correct your child, to parent your child. But if you unnecessarily hurt them, you have committed violence. It means you have broken one of the principles. And so we have to be a little bit more careful, okay? We have to be more careful, because having this high-profile spiritual understanding, practicing this philosophy, practicing bhakti, tells a lot about how we recognize the value of others, how we recognize the good of others, because just like the way we treat our guru, we should treat everyone else like that. The way we serve Krishna nicely, we should treat everyone else like that. Lord Krishna mentioned in his conversation with Arjuna in the Padma Purana that those who say are my devotees, those who try to serve me directly, are not recognized by me as my devotees. Those who serve my devotees are the actual devotees. And so, again, it boils down, but who are the devotees? Your children are devotees. Your wife is a devotee. Your husband is a devotee. So we should extend this service attitude to everyone around us, not just we focusing on how to serve our guru nicely, how to serve the sciences nicely, and we neglect how to be able to serve those around us nicely. If we just expand on that mindset, we can make a society where people will always feel that they are in a heavenly planet. Does it make sense?
Yes, Maharaj. Thank you so much. Yes.
You're welcome. Any other last comment? Because I'm trying to go according to time, okay? Well, if there is no other comment, then we like to call for adjournment or the adjournment of this meeting. Thank you very much for participating in this Krishna consciousness. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.
Thank you so much, Maharaj.
You're welcome.